Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and it's time once again for another movie review. And this time out, it is time to review The Dark Knight Rises, finally. I actually got the opportunity to see this last night in a Dark Knight marathon where I saw Batman Begins, and then The Dark Knight, and then The Dark Knight Rises at midnight. And that was just an exceptional way to see this movie, because even though I just watched the previous two films about a month ago, you know, eventually you're going to lose some details. So to see all three in a row was just an excellent way to get the most out of the experience, I think, and it was just a lot of fun. Okay, The Dark Knight Rises, the film. This is the epic conclusion to Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, and this takes place about 8 years after the events in The Dark Knight. And just so you know, I'm going to try and do this completely spoiler-free, so I may be vague about some things, I may skip over a lot, I may leave a lot of plot details out. The reason I'm doing that is because I worked very diligently to not spoil this movie for myself by reading reviews or, you know, listening to people talk about it, just because I was afraid somebody would give something away. So I'm going to be completely, or as completely spoiler-free as I can possibly be, because I don't want to ruin it for you. So. But I will tell you the plot. Like I said, it does take place 8 years after the events in The Dark Knight, and what we have is a Gotham City that is now living under the rule of the Dent Act, which was something that was passed, a series of laws that was passed after the martyrdom, basically, of Harvey Dent at the end of The Dark Knight, whereas Batman took the blame for the murders that were actually committed by Harvey Dent in an effort to keep that White Knight persona alive and to give the people of Gotham hope that things could get better. Well, they've gotten better, at least on the surface of Gotham, and Bruce Wayne has basically holed himself up in his mansion, and Batman has not been seen since the death of Harvey Knight. So 8 years, no Bruce Wayne, no Batman. And through a series of events, which I won't really get into, that involve Selina Kyle, who is a cat burglar who finds her way into Wayne Manor, and a very ambitious young policeman named John Blake, Batman, Bruce Wayne, learns about this villain named Bane. And after a series of events, Batman comes out of retirement to fight Bane. And what Batman doesn't realize is Bane is probably the most formidable foe that he's ever faced. And that's all I really want to say. I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that as a conclusion, or as the conclusion to the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, this movie had a lot to live up to, a lot of hype to live up to, a lot of expectations to live up to, and I have to say that it falls a little bit short of the hype, and it fell just a little bit short of my expectations, but still, overall, it is a very enjoyable film, and it is a very satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. Things that I liked about it: I liked the action scenes. I definitely like the performances from everybody involved. I don't think anybody hits a sour note in the film at all. Christian Bale probably gives the best performance of the trilogy in this particular film. Although the movie doesn't have a performance that stands out like Heath Ledger's did in The Dark Knight, everybody is very good just across the board. Anne Hathaway in particular, she almost steals the show as Selina Kyle. She's very sexy, very cunning, very duplicitous in the role, and I liked her a lot. And I actually preferred her performance of Catwoman over the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman from Batman Returns. I'm sure that'll anger a few people, but oh well, that's just the way I see it. I found her much more attractive in the role. I found her character obviously to be a lot more realistic than the Catwoman in Batman Returns, and I realized that there are some, you know, obviously major visionary and visual differences between those two type of films, but I just prefer Nolan's take on the character, and I prefer Anne Hathaway in the role. Tom Hardy as Bane, he's got a lot of handicaps going against him with this, because he's got this mask that covers up the lower part of his face, So he's got to do a lot of acting with his eyes and his physical presence, and he does a great job with that. He has this sort of strut that just exudes this physical confidence, and I thought that was very, very cool. Unfortunately, with his character, though, because of that mask, a lot of what he says, because it's sort of broadcast as this amplified voice, it's sort of hard to hear. Well, it's more than sort of hard to hear. It's just plain hard to hear. So a lot of his lines were lost to this garbled electronic effect that they put on his voice, which stunk because a lot of the things that I could understand him saying, he had some great lines. So I think with some repeat viewings, maybe on Blu-ray with the subtitles on, I'll get a little bit more out of his performance. But overall, though, he's really good. Of course, everybody else involved, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, Gary Oldman, are all top-notch. Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing John Blake, he's really good. And the new gadget, I guess you could call it, that Batman has, which is just called the Bat, is really, really visually outstanding. Although it's slightly underutilized, but it is very, very cool. So what didn't I like about The Dark Knight Rises? Well, it's just a little bit too long. It borders on 3 hours long, and one of the things that I think could have been more effective and more efficient with the film is that there's so much exposition in this film. There's so much explaining and flashbacks and going back and trying to explain stuff I don't think is necessary for what is the third film in a trilogy. We've had 2 films prior to this where we could get some exposition out of the way. It's really not necessary in the third film. I realize we have a new villain or new villains, and we have some new characters and new situations. Fine, explain those. But there were a lot of things that were sort of referred back to. I don't know if they were trying to bring in people who maybe didn't watch the first 2 films as much as possible, or what, but there just seemed to be a lot of explaining and a lot of wheel spinning and thumb twiddling that just could have been tightened up quite a bit. And I think there was sort of, I don't know if Nolan felt this need to tie everything back to the first film somehow, or that was the overall plan, but it just seemed unnecessarily complex for what the eventual payoff is. That's not to say it's bad, it's just that there's a lot of the film that seems like it's dead time, or it's just a lot of people talking, and there's not a lot of action. What action is there is great, but there is pretty much a lack of Batman in a Batman film. And one of the problems I had with the Bruce Wayne character is that, they show him as this physically and emotionally crippled man after, 8 years of sorrow for the death of Rachel Dawes, but he's got this confidence when he puts on the Batman uniform, and it just was hard to buy the fact that on one side of his alter ego he was this broken, crippled, emotionally man, but when he would put this costume on, he just suddenly was very full of himself. And somebody may watch that and go, well, I didn't see that in the film. It's just some things he says and the way he acts and the way he assumes he's going to be superior to everybody. And in particular, pay attention to the first conflict with Bane physically. He just underestimates Bane, and he just exudes this confidence that's completely lacking in the Bruce Wayne character. If I had to rate this, I don't want it to sound like it's a terrible rating. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, which is less than Batman Begins and less than what I gave Dark Knight. But it's still a really strong movie. It is really worth seeing. If you've watched the other 2 films and you've been invested in them, you're not going to be overly disappointed with The Dark Knight Rises. It's just that for 2 films preceding it that were so meticulously crafted and so well done and just so awesome, this one just falls short of awesome and just lands in the realm of, wow, it's really good. And I think no matter what, Nolan had to go up against all of this hype and expectations, and I think he just sort of overcomplicated a film that could have been a lot more kick-ass than it ends up being, but it's still a really kick-ass movie. I really think you should see it. And if you can, I don't know that the option is going to be available now, but if you can watch it with Batman Begins and Dark Knight back to back. I really think that would be an awesome way to see it because, you know, that's how I watched it. So will I see it again? Probably. I'll probably wait another week or so and then go again. I don't know that my opinion of it will change any, but I really think you should see it. So there you go. That's my review of The Dark Knight Rises, an 8 out of 10. And as always, feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Take it easy.